Hey guys, today we're going to talk about the 1960s book by Maurice Sendak, Where the Wild Things Are. We're going to talk about the book, and then we're going to talk about the movie as well. So I'm pretty excited because the movie I watched when I was like a younger kid, and it scared me. And the book I didn't read the book as much when I was younger. I think I read it like twice. I had it read to me at like a story time or something when I was younger, but I don't really think I really gave it too much mind. We're going to talk about the book first, and then we're going to talk about the movie afterwards, and then we'll get into the themes of both of them, because there's a lot there, especially in the movie. Oh my god, my mind was going to go. And if you don't notice, I'm also wearing this Max cosplay that I made, and like took me like 30 minutes to make this, but it's not very good. I wound up looking more like a homeless furry than anything else, so that kind of sucks. But at least I tried. I tried to make something cool here. I'm pretty proud of these things I sewed on here. They don't look the best, but like, I made them. So what is this book even about anyways, right? You're probably wondering, if you haven't read it. But it's about this guy named Max, this little kid named Max, right? And he's wearing a wolf suit. He's running around his house causing, all sorts of trouble. He's chasing his dog with a fork for some reason. And his mom's like, stop it, stop, Max, what are you doing? And he says, I'll eat you up. He's going to eat his mom up. He's going to eat her. So back off, lady. Right? But that lady doesn't care about getting eaten up because he sends her to his room without any supper. So he doesn't get to eat at all, Which is pretty crappy of his mom, but whatever, right? And he's pretty mad at this, he's pretty angry, but all these woods start going around his room, and then like he goes into the woods, right? And then there's water everywhere, and then he sees a boat for himself, right? And he carves his name in it. It says Max, and he takes a trip in this boat for like a year until he makes it to where the wild things are. And they're trying to scare him off at first, but Max isn't scared. He's not scared at all. He does a little magic trick. He stares him in the eyes without blinking once, and then they crown him their king, right? So he gets to be crowned king of the wild things, right? And then upon being crowned king, he says, let the wild rumpus begin. And so they start dancing at the moon, howling at the moon, jumping around, doing all these sorts of weird dances. And then all of a sudden Max goes, stop. And then he sends them to bed without any supper, to get back, somebody, because he got sent to bed without any supper. And then when they're sleeping, he's sitting there and he starts to feel really lonely, and he wants to go where somebody loves him the most. He wants to go back to his parents or his mom's house. And so the wild things don't want him to leave, but he's already in his boat, and they start, gnashing their teeth at him, but he just waves at him goodbye, says goodbye to him. And then he gets back home and he sees this bowl of soup on the table, still warm, just sitting there waiting for him. And that's where the wild things are. Now that we've talked about the book, I want to talk about the adaptations of Where the Wild Things Are. There's a few. There's one that was an opera in the 80s by Oliver Nunson. It was adapted by this guy, Oliver Nunson, I think his name is. It's pretty good as far as operas go. I don't really know much about operas, but after looking up some footage, I think I need to watch the rest of it because it seems quite interesting. So I couldn't find any footage of the opera that had audio for some reason, but here it is without any audio. If you want to watch, part of it, here's a clip. In 1983, Disney even used Where the Wild Things Are as like inspiration for testing their CGI, like for future use, So like they did a whole like CGI scene it's really beautiful as far as, Disney standards go, as usual, but like I really wish we could have seen like a full Disney adaptation. Nonetheless, the adaptation we'll mostly be talking about is the 2009 adaptation, not the opera. The 2009 adaptation was directed by Spike Jonze, scripted by Spike Jonze as well as Dave Eggers. And it also has a soundtrack by Karen O and the Kids. It's a really beautiful soundtrack. I listen to it on Spotify quite a lot. And yeah, it's a really good movie. It sort of takes the main structure and story of Where the Wild Things Are and adds like a deeper sort of context to it, which I thought was really interesting. It's about Max, the kid Max in the book, who's dealing with his parents' divorce, as well as being a really lonely kid. He doesn't have any friends, and his sister doesn't really talk to him much anymore, after the divorce, and they're kind of growing apart because his sister is really having she's a teenager and she has all these friends and stuff, so she doesn't really want to talk with Max anymore. So he's having a real big go of it. He's having a real bad go of it. He's dealing with a lot of emotions that he doesn't know what to do with, and so he acts out like a wild thing. You know what I'm saying? So yeah. But on to the actual summary of the movie. So the movie begins with Max sitting in this igloo. And I remember when I watched it when I was a kid, and I was like, wow, I really want to build an igloo. It's like this little igloo house made out of like a snowbank that he made into like an igloo house. And I remember when I watched it as a kid, I tried making it outside, like his igloo house in the movie, and it didn't work very well. So that made me really sad. But so he's sitting in the igloo house, and then he goes and talks to his sister who's talking on the phone. He's like, hey sister, hey, come out and look at my igloo house. Come out and look at my igloo. And she doesn't want to talk to him. She's talking on the phone, And she's just talking on the phone. She's like, yeah, go play with your friends. And Max just sort of looks like,
Max, go and play with your friends.
he just looks like that. He just looks bad. He's really rough. He's really sad. So he talks with his friends. He doesn't really have any friends. So he talks to a fence. And he starts yelling at the fence. He's like, you're a stupid fence. That's what he says. He says it in the movie, okay? He calls the fence stupid, then he kicks it.
No, don't talk to me like that. You're just a fence. You can go play with your own fence friends. Now move out!
And then Max's sister's friends show up. And Max sits behind the fence, and he's got a bunch of snowballs, that he hid in his igloo house. And he's got a bunch of snowballs, and then he attacks them, when they're about to hang out. And then they start having a snowball fight, and it's really fun. They're smiling. It's happy. It's happy. It's really happy. But then they chase him into where his igloo house is, and one of his sister's friends jumps on it and smashes it, and almost sort of suffocates Max under the snow. Not suffocates, that's really dark, oh my god, but he can't breathe under the snow, and he gets out and he's crying because his igloo house is broken, and nobody really cared, right? Nobody said sorry. He's crying, and then the friend actually checks on him. He's like, are you okay? And then he's just crying, he's bawling his eyes out. And then he walks off, and then he looks at his sister, and his sister doesn't say anything to them, to the friends, and that's really what hurts him the most. So after that, he goes on a tantrum, because they left, the sister and all them leave, and he goes on a tantrum. He goes into his sister's room, and he starts breaking everything. He breaks this little gift that he made for her. It was this heart-shaped thing that said, from Max. That's what it said. And he broke it, and he's stomping around the house, jumping on her bed, and he's got snow on his feet and everything, so he's getting the carpet all wet and everything. But then after he, lets all his anger out and his frustrations, he looks down at, the mess he caused, and he's just sort of sad, he looks at it, and he doesn't feel any better because he caused the mess. And he looks down, he just feels really regretful, and he fixes the little heart thing that he'd made for his sister. He fixes it for her, kind of. And then whenever Max's mom shows up, his mom helps him, like, clean up the room. He's like, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. And she's like, Max, why did you do that? And then he was like, Claire's sister, he was like, Claire's friends broke my igloo house, and she didn't even say anything. And then his mom's like, well, if I was there, I'd say something. So they're cleaning up his his sister's room. They're cleaning up the room, and then he's sort of just sitting under the table. His mom's like writing. I think she's like a writer or something. I'm not really exactly sure what she does, but she's not very successful with it. I think she's a reporter. But she's like on the phone, and this like guy's like, yeah, this reporting's not very good, or something like that. You have to do a new one. And she was like, okay, And then they're sitting under the table, and Max is just sort of sitting there playing by his mom's feet. And she's sitting there typing, and then she looks down at him, and he just looks really sad and lonesome. He just looks really lonely, She's like, why don't you tell me a story? And it's a really, kind of a sad story.
There were some buildings. There were these really tall buildings, and they could walk. Then there were some vampires. One of the vampires bit the tallest building, and his fangs broke off. Then all his other teeth fell out. Then he started crying. And then all the other vampires said, why are you crying? Aren't those just your baby teeth? And he said, no, those are my grown-up teeth. And the vampires knew that he couldn't be a vampire anymore, so they left him. The end.
Next day, I think he goes to school, right? He goes to school and he's happy playing, games with the kids. And then he goes to this class, and this teacher is talking about how the universe is expanding and how the sun is going to die. So Max is like genuinely like, he's having like an existential crisis just sitting in class, right? Because this person's talking about how the sun's going to die and how it's going to engulf the earth and all the other planets, and then our universe is just not going to be, there's nothing going to be in our universe. And then he says it won't really matter though, because the human race will probably be extinct by then. So what a great thing to be teaching children. I mean, I guess that's okay. So after that, he's, after having his existential crisis, he's driving home with his mom and his sister, and they're all looking out the window, each to their individual window, and they're sort of just disconnected from each other. You can tell like the divorce really, hit them hard, and they're just sitting, and then he's looking at his sister and he's looking at his mom, and you could tell he's sort of thinking like, dang, it's like, my family's like the universe, and it's just, dying. Like his family unit's dying, after the divorce. They don't talk to each other, they don't really interact with each other, and he's really hurt by, the changes that are going on. He's not really sure how to deal with that feeling. And so when they go home, that later that night, his mom's on a date with Mark Ruffalo, by the way. She's on a date with Mark Ruffalo. Max is like really kind of jealous, and he's kind of like, he's seeing his mom with this another guy after the divorce, and he's really not sure what to do with that feeling. And then he's sitting in his room, and he's like, hey, I rebuilt my fort, because it's his igloo, but he made like an actual regular fort in his room instead of the igloo. So he's like, hey, Mom, I rebuilt my fort. Come up here. And then she's like, Max, I'm busy. And he's like, oh, I'll save a space for you. And it's just so sad. I don't know, it's so sad. And so he gets really angry, and so he acts out, for attention. Obviously, he's wanting attention from his mom, so he puts on his signature wolf costume.
Max, get off the couch. Please get off. I have a friend here. You're embarrassing me.
Woman, feed me!
Max, get off the get off the counter. Get off the damn counter. counter, Max. Now. Now.
I'll eat you up!
Get down! Stop! What is wrong with you? This is not acceptable behavior.
You're not acceptable!
No dinner for you, Max. Go to your room. Ow! Max, you bit me.
Yeah, he bites her, and then Mark Ruffalo comes over because he's the boyfriend, and for some reason he thinks he has any authority over him at all, and he's like, you can't let him do that to you. What are you doing? You can't let him do that to you, which just pisses me off, right? And then she's like, Max, why are you like this? And then he's like, it's not my fault. And that's what he says. I'm not going to yell it, but yeah. He's like, it's not my fault. That's what he says. So then he runs away, and his mom chases after him. And he's too fast, right? He's too fast, and he runs into the forest, and then he's breaking, a bunch of tree limbs, and he's smashing tree limbs, and breaking sticks and stuff out in his anger. He's like, I hate you. That's what he says. I hate you. That's what he says. I hate you. That's what he says. And then he finds a boat. Like in the book, he finds the boat, and he sails out on the water. And he's sailing for at least a couple days. I don't think it's a year, like it was in the book, and it was a year-long journey in the book, but I don't think it was that long in the movie. So then he finds this island, and then he sort of gets on this shipwreck. His ship wrecks onto the island. And he's walking through the island, and he sees this fire on the island. He follows to the smoke trail to the fire. And then he's seeing this guy. Well, it's not really a guy. He's a wild thing. He's a monster creature thing. And he's smashing things, breaking houses, and all the other, wild things are freaking out about this. And by the way, the wild things I think are a CGI. I think they're CGI. I'm pretty certain they're CGI. I don't know if they used practical effects mixed with CGI. I think it looks pretty good, but I also don't know much about CGI. So the wild thing, his name is Carol, and Carol's breaking a bunch of stuff. The Carol's acting out. He keeps saying, he's like, KW left, which we'll find out later. KW is another one of the wild things. He's really angry about that her leaving, and so Max goes and helps out Carol, breaking the houses up, and then the other wild things are like, who are you? What are you doing? And he's like, I'm helping out. And then they're like, you're helping out by breaking our houses? And he's like, oh, I didn't know that was your houses. I didn't know you lived here. And then then they're thinking about eating him up. They're thinking about eating him up. And they're like, we're going to eat you up. He's like, you shouldn't do that. And then they're like, why? And he's like, because I have powers from another land.
You can't eat me. You didn't know that, so I forgive you, but never try it again.
Why not?
I have powers from another land.
Powers?
From ancient times. Don't make me show you. I had to show these Vikings once.
Vikings? Who's a Viking?
And then they're mystified, by this. They're mystified, and they're like, whoa, he's got powers. And he's like, yeah, I've traveled around, I was the king of the Vikings.
I had to show these Vikings once.
Vikings? Who's a Viking?
Well, they wear horn hats.
And they're bigger than you are. They're bigger than you guys, and I slayed them, or I conquered them. And they're like, okay, well, you're the king. And then they're like, then he says, he says this really important thing. He says, like, if I were king, there'd be a sadness shield to keep out all the sadness. No one would ever be sad again. Everybody's really happy about this because, Carol was just really angry, breaking things, everything like that. And then they're really happy about that. And then he says, then they make him his king. They make him, then they make him their king. And then he says, the So the next day, Max gets introduced to all the other wild things, pretty much. So there's Judith and Ira, who are in love with each other, I guess.
Oh, that's Judith and Ira. They're in love.
Then there's Alexander the goat, who is played by Paul Dano. I didn't even realize it.
That's Alexander.
Look, I hate this tree!
No, wait, what was that?
That's Douglas.
70s?
I count on him for everything.
Well,
If I was stranded on a desert island, I could only take one thing. Be Douglas. We can share him if you want.
We haven't formally met. I'm Ira. I put the holes in the trees. Maybe you saw those? Maybe not. Anyways, it's what I do. Not really important, like things that you do. Oh, and this is Judith.
You don't really need to know me. Kind of a downer.
King, that's not true.
And then there's KW, which is the one that keeps leaving the group, you know? She keeps leaving the group. And then Carol, of course, who is played by James Gandolfini. You know, Tony Soprano, you know, Gabagoo, you know, that guy.
Any cold pasta?
There was some ziti, but it all got eaten.
Yeah, so he meets all the other wild things, and then there's a bull too. I forget his name because he only has like one line throughout the movie. He only speaks like one line. And it's at the very end of the movie, and it's a really sweet line. But anyways, so after he gets and meets all the other wild things, they have this, you know, wild rumpus again, you know, and then they lay in this pack of, you know, like this giant pile of they just lay in a pile together. It's like this really sweet like scene. But then they lay in a pile together. Then when Max wakes up, he's like riding on the back of Carol, and Carol's taking him and showing him the rest of his kingdom. And then they go to this sand dune area, and Carol's like, "Oh, this is my least favorite part of the island." You know, he's like, it used to be all rock, now it's dust. And then pretty soon the whole island will be dust. And then Max basically gives him an existential crisis by telling him soon, you know, someday the sun will die too.
Carol.
Mm-hmm.
Did you know the sun was gonna die?
What? I never heard that. Oh, come on. That can't happen. I mean, you're the king, and look at me. I'm big. How could guys like us worry about a tiny little thing like the sun? Huh?
He's like, no, that can't be right. That can't be true. And he kind of denies it. He kind of just doesn't want to accept the fact that the sun's going to die. But then Carol shows Max this little hideaway thing where he's built like this diorama made of like sticks and rocks and clay and stuff.
All right, now watch.
I wish I could live in there.
Yeah. It's gonna be a place where only the things you wanted to have happen would happen.
Yeah.
I guess if that's not gonna happen, I'll just probably end up eating my feet off.
Carol, we could totally build a place like that.
Really?
We're gonna start with the perfect fort, and then we're gonna build the city around it, because we've gotta be real.
And Max even gives him the idea. He's like, well, what if we just build this fort? You know, what if we just build a fort and make it into a city? And he's like, we can't start with the city, though. We have to build the fort first, you know. So he's got all these crazy ideas, and then they start building this, you know, this fort together. And Max and Carol sort of bond over their shared fears and emotions and feelings they have, because they have very similar feelings. You know, Carol gets very angry like Max does, gets very sad like Max does, and it's really sweet. So Judith, one of the other wild things, gets jealous because she's like, oh, you pick favorites. And then KW, which is one of the other wild things, comes over to having their conversation and sort of takes Max away. And then they meet KW's friends, Bob and Terry, who are just owls. They don't even really talk, but Max pretends he can understand them because he doesn't want to hurt KW's feelings, right? And then they bring the owls, Bob and Terry, back to the fort, and Carol freaks out, and he's like, I thought they're, you know, I thought we weren't supposed to have people here, that we don't want here, Max. So he kind of hurts KW's feelings, and KW's thinking about leaving again, as she did in the beginning when Max found the wild things in the first place. So instead, they have a dirt clod war. They just throw dirt at each other, because Max thinks it's like a bonding thing. Like he thinks if we can let them bond together, KW will stay, and everybody will be happy. It doesn't work out that way because Carol freaks out at KW because he thinks that KW was trying to step on his face, even though she didn't, she didn't mean to. And he freaks out and they have an argument. Since Max didn't do exactly as he promised to the wild things, like he said, you'll never be, sad again, Carol's still sad, and he freaks out at Max. He's like, "Hey, I thought you were supposed to help us. I thought you were supposed to be a king and help us." And so Douglas comes up, and Douglas says to Carol, he's not a king. He's just a kid dressed up as a wolf, dressed up as a king. So after Douglas says that to Carol, Carol rips his arm off.
How could you say that? Don't you dare say that.
There's no such thing as a king.
Don't you say that.
He's just a boy, pretending to be a wolf, pretending to be a king.
That's not true.
He's just like us.
Oh, I don't listen to myself.
That's not true.
Look, I just went along with it because I knew you wanted it so much.
Don't say that!
No! Stop it!
Carol!
Stop it! What are you doing?
Carol!
What?
That was my favorite arm.
Well, I was just holding on to it. You pulled away.
What?
Yeah. It's pretty terrifying, to be honest. But then Carol chases Max through the woods, and then Max, has to hide in KW's stomach or mouth or something. He jumps in her mouth. It's really weird, and he's scared he's going to get eaten up, but he hides in her mouth so he can not get eaten up by Carol. Sort of an ironic scene, I guess. Carol and KW are talking. It sort of mirrors Max and his mom talking with each other. And Max sort of realizes, oh crap, I'm like that, and that's not good. It's not good to lash out at your friends and family when you get angry. And after Carol leaves, Max says, he doesn't mean to be like that. He's just scared. He's just scared. And he loves you, and he's sort of, what he's saying there is he's really talking to his mom. He's really thinking about him and his mom, how they, they argued. And after that, Max goes to sleep, and he decides he needs to head home. And so he gets back on his boat, or he's getting back on his boat, and Carol isn't there. He says goodbye to all the other wild things, and the bull character, who doesn't really speak throughout the any of the movie, he says to Max
"Hey, Max.
Yeah?
When you go home, will you say good things about us?"
Yeah. I will.
Thanks, Max.
You're the first king we haven't eaten.
Yeah, it's true.
So he gets on the boat, and then Carol comes running back because he made this little stick heart thing for Carol, and Carol's like, "Oh, that's really sweet." And then he comes running back to Max while he's sailing away in the boat, and he howls at Max, and then Max howls back, So they sort of share this moment as he's leaving. So Max gets back home. He runs back home and sees his mom, and then they hug each other. And then his mom makes him soup and like milk, because I think that's the meal that was in the book, you know. And that's how the movie ends. So a bit of so to preface this, before I talk about my analysis of the movie, I'm not very good at analyzing things in a cohesive way. That's kind of why I just talk about things at random, because I'm not very good at structuring my ideas, and yeah, I guess that's just ADHD brain, but I'm just gonna talk about what I feel the movie is about. It's just my interpretation. You can agree or disagree with me. I don't really care. So yeah, we're gonna talk about the movie. When Max, at the beginning we see Max, he's acting out, and he's very angry, and he's very scared. He has all these sort of emotions that he doesn't know what to deal with. So he acts out, in anger, and he breaks things and acts like the wild things do on the island. And so when he arrives on the island, he sort of finds like a common ground with them, because they all experience, the similar emotions that he's experiencing, especially Carol more specifically. And that's kind of why he bonds with Carol the most, towards the beginning of his time on the island anyways, because as he spends more time on the island with the wild things, he starts to, sort of see his mom's point of view, like see himself from his mom's point of view. And he's like, wow, my emotions, get the better of me a lot of the times, and that's not good. He's almost scared. He's scared by seeing his emotions acted out by someone else. And I think it's the part where he's hiding in KW's mouth, and Carol and KW are arguing with each other, where he sort of really realizes, like, oh crap, this is what my mom has to deal with all the time. I can't express my emotions like this, or it'll just drive people away. And that's really what the wild things... That's really where the wild... that's really what I can't speak. And that's really what where the wild things is about, I think. It's about being a child and learning to deal with more intense emotions as you're growing up, and figuring out ways of managing those emotions, because they don't go away, but you can't, throw a tantrum every time you get angry, and you can't wreck things every time you get sad. You have to find healthier ways of dealing with your emotions and talking about your emotions, rather than just expressing the emotions that you can't explain through anger. And that's sort of what I thought the movie was about. If you made it this far into the video, thanks for watching me talk about where the wild things are for 30 or so minutes. If you want to subscribe, that'd be cool. Also, what would be even cooler, if you could tell me what to talk about next. I'm kind of wanting to talk about more books, but I don't know what books to talk about next. I thought about Treasure Island or Fight Club. I can't decide which one. Those are completely different books. Anyways, thanks for watching. If you want to, you can subscribe, or you can like it if you feel like it. Anyways, thanks for watching.